Remember when we all thought we'd never go back to the office? Well, plot twist. Look, I need to tell you something that might sting a little. That whole remote work revolution we celebrated during the pandemic? The one where we threw confetti over never commuting again and working in our pajamas forever. Yeah, it's not exactly dead, but it's definitely not what we thought it would be. And here's the thing that's absolutely fascinating. What replaced it isn't what any of the experts predicted. Not the employers, not the employees, and definitely not the productivity gurus who wrote 1,000 LinkedIn posts about it. So buckle up, because we're about to dive into one of the most dramatic workplace transformations in modern history, and trust me, the plot twists will surprise you. The Great Remote Work Reality Check. Let's start with the hard data, because numbers don't lie even when our Instagram stories about digital nomad life do. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, remote work peaked at about 35% of the workforce in May 2020. By 2024, that number has settled at roughly 13-15%, still higher than the pre-pandemic 5%, but nowhere near that revolutionary peak we all expected to become permanent. But here's where it gets really interesting. Stanford economist Nicholas Bloom, and this guy has been studying remote work since before it was cool, found something absolutely mind-blowing in his research. The productivity gains from remote work, they weren't coming from where we thought. We all assumed it was about avoiding office distractions, right? No more Karen from accounting interrupting your flow, no more pointless meetings in conference rooms that smell like stale coffee. But Bloom's data showed the real productivity boost came from something much simpler. People were working longer hours at home. Not because they were more efficient, but because the boundaries between work and life had completely dissolved. Think about it. When your bedroom is 20 feet from your office, and I'm using air quotes because let's be honest, it was probably your kitchen table, when do you actually stop working? When your laptop is always there, silently judging you with its closed lid, when your Slack notifications are pinging at 9 p.m. because your colleague in a different time zone just had a quick thought. Harvard Business School professor Prithviraj Chowdhury published research showing that while individual productivity often increased in remote settings, something crucial was dying, what he called collaborative innovation. Those spontaneous conversations by the water cooler, the accidental meetings in hallways, the rapid-fire brainstorming sessions that happened when someone just popped their head over a cubicle wall, all of that creative collision was evaporating. And companies started noticing, not just the obvious stuff like decreased team cohesion, but measurable impacts on their bottom line. McKinsey's research found that while routine tasks maintained or improved productivity remotely, complex problem-solving and innovation metrics were dropping significantly. But here's the kicker, and this is where the story gets really fascinating. Employees weren't just productive machines optimizing for maximum output. They were human beings trying to navigate an entirely new way of existing. The American Psychological Association started documenting what they called remote work fatigue. And no, it wasn't just about Zoom calls making us feel weird, though let's be honest, staring at your own face for 8 hours a day is a special kind of psychological torture. It was about the cognitive load of managing work relationships through screens, the exhaustion of performing productivity when you're isolated, the anxiety of not knowing if your career was advancing when you couldn't see the subtle office politics playing out around you. The contrasting reality, what employees actually wanted. But wait, because here's where every expert got it wrong. When companies started mandating return-to-office policies, everyone predicted massive resignations, right? The Great Resignation was going to become the Great Remote Work Standoff. Except, that's not what happened. Gallup's 2024 workplace survey revealed something that should have been obvious, but caught everyone off guard. Most employees didn't actually want to be fully remote or fully in office. What they wanted was something much more nuanced, much more human. They wanted flexibility. Not the kind of flexibility that corporate HR departments love to put in job postings, flexible schedule, but real, genuine control over how they structured their work lives. Picture Sarah, a marketing manager in Denver. She doesn't want to work from home 5 days a week because she misses the energy of collaborative brainstorming sessions, and honestly, her home office is also her toddler's playroom. But she also doesn't want to commute downtown 5 days a week because Tuesday and Thursday she's most productive when she can deep focus without interruptions, and her most creative thinking happens during her morning routine at home. Sarah doesn't want remote work or office work. She wants both, strategically, intentionally. And it turns out, Sarah represents about 70% of knowledge workers, according to research from PwC's Future of Work survey. But here's the plot twist within the plot twist. Companies that tried to give employees this flexibility discovered something that challenged everything we thought we knew about workplace productivity. The most successful hybrid arrangements weren't the ones where companies said work wherever you want, whenever you want. They were the ones with very intentional, strategic structures. Teams that designated specific days for collaborative work and specific days for individual deep work. Companies that redesigned their office spaces not as places where people sat at desks for 8 hours, but as hubs for the kind of work that genuinely benefits from physical proximity. Microsoft's internal data, and they've been incredibly transparent about this because they're basically running one of the world's largest workplace experiments, showed that their highest performing teams had clear collaboration days and focus days. Not arbitrary flexibility, but thoughtful, purposeful hybrid structures. What actually emerged? So here's what actually replaced the remote work dream, and it's way more sophisticated than anyone predicted. It's not hybrid work. That's just the surface level. What emerged is what workplace researchers are calling intentional work design. And this is genuinely revolutionary, even if it doesn't sound as sexy as work from a beach in Bali. Companies started asking fundamentally different questions. Instead of where should people work, they started asking what type of work requires what type of environment. Instead of how do we monitor productivity, they started asking how do we design work experiences that bring out people's best thinking. Take Spotify's approach, they call it work from anywhere, but that's misleading. What they actually created is a system where different types of work happen in different environments optimized for that specific work. Complex strategic planning happens in person during intensive collaboration sessions. Individual coding and content creation happens wherever employees are most focused. Team bonding and culture building happens through intentional, periodic in-person experiences. And the results? Their employee satisfaction scores are higher than they were pre-pandemic, and their innovation metrics are higher than they were during peak remote work, because they're not trying to force one working style to serve all purposes. But here's the really fascinating part: this shift revealed something profound about American work culture that we'd never fully acknowledged. We'd always assumed that productivity was about optimizing individual performance, but what the pandemic taught us is that work is fundamentally social, not just in the office friendships way, but in the deep, cognitive way that humans solve complex problems and create innovative solutions. The companies that are thriving in this new landscape aren't the ones that got remote work right or office work right, they're the ones that got human psychology right. Looking forward, the future of work architecture. So what does this mean for the future? Because we're not going back to 2019, but we're also not living in the 2020 remote work fantasy. What's emerging is something I call work architecture, and by that I mean the intentional design of when, where, and how different types of work happen. Imagine this: you're a product designer. Monday mornings, your entire team meets in person for strategic planning and brainstorming, not because some executive mandated it, but because your team discovered that's when you generate your most innovative ideas. Tuesday and Wednesday, you work from wherever you're most focused because those are your deep design work days. Thursday, you're back in the office for client presentations and cross-team collaboration. Friday, you work from home because that's when you do administrative tasks and plan for the following week. This isn't random flexibility. This is strategic work, designed based on understanding what types of cognitive work happen best in what types of environments. And the office spaces themselves are transforming. They're not becoming obsolete, but they're also not going back to rows of cubicles and assigned desks. They're becoming what workplace designers call collaboration hubs, spaces specifically designed for the kind of work that benefits from physical proximity. But here's the most important thing, and this is what I think most people are missing in all the debates about remote work versus office work versus hybrid work. This transformation isn't really about work location, it's about work intentionality. For the first time in modern history, we're designing work around human psychology instead of industrial efficiency. We're asking what brings out people's best thinking, instead of how do we monitor people most effectively. And that might actually be the real revolution. The deeper questions. But this raises some pretty profound questions that I think we need to grapple with as a society. If we can be this intentional about work design, why aren't we being this intentional about other aspects of our lives? If we can create environments optimized for different types of thinking and collaboration, what does that mean for how we design our schools, our communities, our relationships? And here's a question that keeps me up at night. Are we creating a world where only knowledge workers get this kind of intentional work design? What about the millions of Americans whose jobs can't be done remotely or flexibly? Are we accidentally creating a new kind of workplace inequality? The pandemic gave us this massive, unplanned experiment in how we work. But maybe the real lesson isn't about remote work or office work. Maybe it's about paying attention to what actually makes humans thrive, and then having the courage to design our systems around that knowledge instead of around outdated assumptions about productivity and control. What do you think? Have you experienced this shift in your own work life? Are you part of a company that's figured out intentional work design, or are you still stuck in the old binary thinking of remote versus office? Drop a comment and let me know, because this conversation is just getting started, and honestly, your experiences are probably more interesting than all the research studies combined. And if you're dealing with workplace changes in your own life, whether you're an employee trying to navigate new policies or a manager trying to figure out how to design better work experiences, I'd love to hear your story. The comment section is where the real conversation happens.